Story 1. My husband was very sick. I had to take him to the emergency room after he passed out due to dehydration from an intestinal bug he had been dealing with for a few days. On the way there, he called his job to let them know what was happening. We parked in the emergency room garage and received a little ticket, which the hospital validates for patients and their families. He was taken back almost immediately, given fluids and medications, and later taken for a CT scan, among other things. We later found out that a coworker who was upset because she was going to be short-staffed took it upon herself to somehow find our address. She then drove over to our apartment to check if my husband was really sick. She happened to see our upstairs neighbor walking outside. He vaguely resembles my husband. Both are about 6 feet 3 inches tall, with light brown hair and similar builds. However, the neighbor is about 15 years younger and had his infant child with him. Our children are in their late 20s to early 30s. She then went back to work and told the supervisor that we had lied about my husband being sick, claiming she saw him walking around outside at a specific time and that he looked perfectly fine. The following morning, the supervisor called my husband and informed him that he would be written up for calling out under false pretense and causing staffing issues. After pressing the supervisor for more information, he was told about what the coworker had done. My husband told the supervisor that, first of all, we had proof that we were in the emergency room at the exact time she claimed she saw him. Secondly, he said he would be filing a formal complaint with the Human Resources Department against both the coworker and the manager. There is no rule that dictates why someone can or cannot call out, and he wanted to know why on earth a coworker was at our home spying on us. In our state, management is not allowed to inquire about an employee's health, nor are they permitted to have employees disclose their health issues to them. The supervisor became defensive and stated that if we could provide proof, he would excuse the incident. My husband told him, "You'll get your proof," and hung up. He immediately called Human Resources and informed them of the situation. We provided them with a time-stamped parking ticket from the hospital garage and part of the discharge paperwork, showing the exact time we arrived and left the emergency room. The following week, an email was sent out to all employees and management, outlining the laws regarding sick leave. Additionally, a separate notification was sent out stating that employees were not allowed to follow, spy on, or otherwise contact fellow employees outside of the workplace regarding time off, work matters, or similar issues. My husband was later called into a meeting that included the supervisor, the department head, and the female employee who had visited our apartment. During the meeting, both the supervisor and the employee were firmly reprimanded by the department head. The only thing the employee had to say for herself was that the person she saw resembled my husband, and that she was simply upset about being short-staffed. The supervisor's excuse was that the female employee had worked there for a long time, so he trusted her when she reported what she saw. When asked how she managed to get our home address, we found out that the supervisor regularly allowed her access to his computer. Because of this, she had been privy to private information about other employees for quite some time. The department head told my husband that he was free to leave and offered a sincere and formal apology for everything that had happened. Later, we found out that the female employee had been fired, and the supervisor had been demoted and transferred to another department. Story 2. I had an eventful Christmas. Between toxic family members and this situation, Lord knows I'm ready for 2021. Cast. Me? The sarcastic person I am who was not in the mood for nonsense. Wife? Mega hot lady whom I love dearly. Miles the dog. Samson the dog. Entitled mom. Entitled brat who is about 8 years old. Elder entitled brat who had to be around 14 years old. Gramps who was walking on thin ice with me, but in this situation, he was appreciated. So after an incredibly toxic family dinner, my wife and I decided to take our dogs on a walk. I have 2 dogs and both of them are rescues. The first one, named Miles, is Chalkmeister Supreme. super patient and super kind. The other dog, named Samson, is an anxious mess. He was abused, and he barks at random strangers. He is a sweet boy, but we've been working on leash aggression. Anyway, we began our walk around our neighborhood when my wife realized she forgot something. She had Samson and quickly ran inside to grab it. I believe it was gloves. It was cold outside. Don't quote me on that. As I'm waiting in our driveway, this entitled mother and her entitled brat walk by. It starts off as a normal neighborly talk, and then we wish a Merry Christmas. The entitled brat stopped and pet Miles, which is completely fine with me. Miles likes attention, and he is a sweet dog who can handle it. The entitled mother continues talking when I hear a bark come from our front door. I turn and my wife is standing in the doorway. She sees the entitled mother and her brat and goes back in the house and waits for them to leave. That's always our routine with Samson, as he needs a minute to get used to being on his leash. The kid saw my other dog and ran over to the glass door to look at him. Samson is losing his mind behind the glass, and I quickly run over and try to explain the normal. He had a bad owner before we adopted him, so he is scared. The kid didn't care. He wanted to see Samson, and he demanded to see him now. He put his hand on the doorknob to try and open it, and I lightly pushed his hand off it. The entitled mother ran over, and I expected her to explain to her kid why he couldn't just open up someone's door, especially during a pandemic, but instead she yells at me for pushing his hand off. I was taken aback, but apologized nonetheless. I just wanted them to get away from the door. The little boy kept screaming he wanted to see Samson, and I was trying to explain to the mom why that wasn't possible when she crossed her arms and frowned. If he's so violent, maybe I should just call animal control. At this point, my mood is terrible. I look at the woman and tell her that she can get off my property now and have a Merry Christmas. She rolls her eyes and takes her brat by the hand and walks to the street. She stands right off my driveway and crosses her arms and tells me that if I bring that dog out and it barks, she's going to call animal control. The kid is still screaming for the dog, and I just look at my wife, defeated. I felt like this is the type of woman who would follow us on the walk just to be petty. So I walked back into the house, took my dogs off the harnesses, and my wife and we went on our walk without them. That was fine. When we got back, however, my grandfather was screaming at someone. My wife and I ran over to see our back gate open. The original entitled brat and the elder entitled brat, who is new, so sorry if that's confusing, were standing at the gate of our backyard with my grandpa standing between them. They had a super soaker and were wanting to spray our dogs for being mean dogs. I took the water gun from them and broke it. Then I tossed it into the street. Probably overdramatic, but if Samson was back there when they were sneaking back, this could have gone really wrong. They ran off crying, and the entitled mother came waddling back to our house. We wouldn't answer the door, and so she stayed on our porch for 30 minutes and demanded we buy a new super soaker for her kids. When she finally left, she threatened to crack our gate open in the middle of the night so the dogs would get out. Thankfully, my wife had the right mind to record this, so if anything happens, we can bring it to the authorities. I did buy a lock this morning. That's securely on there as we speak. I bought Samson and Miles a treat because they were cute, and I was almost tempted to buy a super soaker and spray them if I ever see them walking around. Just have it locked and loaded. However, I reminded myself I'm an adult and don't want to stir drama. All this to say, please just listen to people when they're working with a reactive dog. Hope everyone here had a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Story 3. I am a pretty compliant person by nature. Generally, I think acting out of spite brings adverse actions. However, even I have a story that might fit here. Many years ago, I was working a factory job in a print company while in undergrad. It was your typical 3-shift/24-hour operation and was open Monday through Friday for operations. Weekends it was open, but mostly for maintenance to work on machines. I worked in shipping, second shift 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. My job was to take the printed goods that had been stacked on pallets by the machine operators and print labels for the shipping weights, destinations, etc., wrap the pallets in plastic wrap, and forklift them into the warehouse until ready to load on a truck. About a month after being hired into the job, the first shift guy was moved to another part of the plant. There wasn't a third shift. That just left me, prepping every pallet for shipment all by my lonesome. It was fine though. The plant manager met with me to tell me I could work any shift I wanted. All the overtime I wanted won. $5 until someone else was hired in to help. So I did. I was racking up the hours. Great money at 19 years old. This went on for the entirety of my time there. The first shift supervisor was kind of a jerk, but generally left me alone because I worked a ton. He would often come on Friday afternoons and tell me a particular truck would be there early Monday morning, and if the shipment wasn't ready to come in on Saturday to get it done. Again, I was generally compliant. After all, Saturdays was a good opportunity to get caught up since the machines were down for maintenance, and in an 8-10 hours Saturday shift, I could have the shipping staging area completely cleaned from the week. Fast forward a few months. Still, they hadn't hired anyone else to help out on another shift. As usual, the shift supervisor came on a Friday afternoon to tell me about a truck that needed to go out early Monday morning. Only this time I had plans, my dad's birthday and a family dinner. I politely told him I wouldn't be able to work the next day for said reason. His answer, "You're scheduled to work then. If you don't come in, I'll write you up." Keep in mind, I had never turned down overtime before, never told them I couldn't come in on a Saturday. I pointed all that out to the shift supervisor. His response, "If you don't like it, McDonald's is right down the street." I calmly told him, "You're right, they might be hiring people like you," and I went back to my area. That's not the malicious compliance though. He came up a few minutes later and told me he didn't care how long I worked on Saturday, but that I needed to come in. So I did. I showed up, clocked in. I did do a little work so they couldn't watch the camera and tell me I was abusing my time on the clock, including part of the shipment needed. Then I left, exactly 1 full hour later. The truck was there waiting for me when I got there at 7 a.m. on Monday to start the shift. It waited while I finished that shipment. I knocked it out quickly so as not to put the truck driver in a bind, and off he went. He wasn't upset about waiting a few minutes. The shift supervisor never said anything else about it, but he was there as I finished it Monday morning and was obviously frustrated. I started looking for another job that week. I found one after a bit. The plant manager wanted an exit interview, and I told him exactly what had prompted me to look for another job, the SS. He apologized for him. I'm certain nothing was ever done about it though. The plant manager position had seen a lot of turnover, and that shift supervisor had been there forever, keeping the business afloat basically. They weren't going to do anything about him running off a low-level college kid like me, even if I did have a ton of work ethic and energy. And Mr. J, if you are reading this, I wish you the best. You probably don't remember me from Adam's House Cat, and that's okay. After nearly 20 years, I still think you were a jerk. Story 4. I went to the Harris Teeter near my workplace, located in a somewhat upscale area, early Friday morning, looking for some cantaloupe. The parking lot was mostly empty. As I pulled in, I noticed a woman who looked like a walking stereotype. She wore a velour, bedazzled sweatsuit and carried a leather handbag. Her skin had a deep tan, and her high, blonde ponytail had visible dark roots. Her age was hard to determine, anywhere from 35 to 65, depending on the lighting. She was unloading her groceries into her flashy Land Rover. I parked in a pull-through spot 1 row away from her. As I was getting out of my car, I saw her fling her shopping cart into the middle of the parking lot, even though there was a cart corral only 3 spaces away. My sense of justice was flaring up that morning, so I turned toward her and said loudly, "Wow, that's just sad. How lazy can one person be?" To my surprise, the call-out worked. She looked a bit embarrassed, retrieved the cart, and returned it to the cart corral. I turned and continued walking toward the store. But guess who decided to follow me? As I reached the curb just outside the store entrance, I noticed she was about 10 feet behind me. Then she started yelling. She opened with, "Who do you think you are, you stupid little witch? You don't tell me what to do." I did what I do best. I ignored her and kept walking. She followed me into the store, still shouting. She was definitely drawing attention. I was making my way toward the produce section with a basket in hand when she suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I turned around, and she pointed her finger directly in my face and screamed, "You will not ignore me." She continued yelling and spitting, acting completely out of control. I took a step back and looked around because, honestly, I was starting to feel afraid. Then she grabbed the basket out of my hand and threw it to the ground. It hit my foot and bounced away. Thankfully, there was an employee in the produce section who saw the entire scene unfold. He quickly stepped forward and tried to de-escalate the situation. However, the entitled woman wasn't interested in calming down. I don't really know what her goal was. Did she want to hit me, scream me into submission, just continue making a fool of herself? It wasn't entirely clear. The employee tried reasoning with her and asked what was wrong. She just kept ranting about how I had disrespected her and how I had no idea who her husband was, as if that somehow mattered. With her attention momentarily on him, I discreetly pulled out my cell phone and called the police. By this time, there were 3 or 4 other people nearby, including the store manager. While I was on the phone providing information to the emergency dispatcher, the manager led me a few steps away from the furious woman and asked me what had happened. With the woman still fuming in the background, I explained everything to both the manager and the dispatcher. I made sure to emphasize that she had put her hands on me, grabbed the shopping basket out of my hand, and thrown it to the ground, causing it to hit my foot. I wasn't physically injured, but I wasn't above letting my reaction sound more serious, just to highlight the severity of her behavior. I'm not sure where she went while I was still on the phone, but by the time the police arrived, she was no longer in the produce section. The officers didn't do anything dramatic. They just took my statement, gave me an incident report summary, and asked if I wished to pursue criminal charges. Of course, I said yes. I left shortly afterward because I had to get to work, and I was already running late. Since this all just happened on Friday, I haven't heard any updates yet. Honestly, I'm still figuring out what I want to do next. I'm considering going forward with pressing charges. There was no real physical harm done, and it's not like she'd end up serving time or anything. Still, actions have consequences, and I think it would be good for her to face at least some of them. And for the record, I never did get that cantaloupe. Story 5. I have an entitled aunt who is so evil and toxic it's unbelievable. I joined Reddit just so I can share her antics. I'm in my 40s, male, so I've got over 3 decades of crazy selfish antics to share. Like ruining weddings, ruining holidays, telling kids they're adopted, breaking up relationships, racism, getting people sacked, demanding money. You can't earn more money than her kids, selling stuff that ain't hers, and of course lying with almost every breath. The list goes on. I'll start with one of my earliest memories of her entitled behavior. First, some light backstory. My aunt is the eldest, let's call her Ruth, of 5. Second on, who is slightly entitled but manageable, dad and 2 brothers. Except my youngest uncle, Kev, the rest worshipped my entitled aunt. They will believe anything that comes out of Ruth's mouth. Or they did until one by one they were on the receiving end of her nonsense. Entitled aunt has 5 kids. She does not discipline her kids. All entitled brats. The sort of kids who constantly fight and shout cause problems wherever they go. Plus the lying and stealing. Roughly similar ages to me. It's early 90s. It's my 10th birthday, I think. Grew up kinda poor, and I knew my youngest uncle got me a Super Nintendo. This was a huge deal for me. My first games console. I was beyond excited. Party at mine on Saturday morning. I opened the door for my aunt and her broods around 10 a.m. Her kids came crashing and pushing me out the way as I chatted to my aunt. My lovely cousins went into the living room and started unwrapping my birthday presents. I protested to my aunt, but she just said her kids are helping me and how kind her kids are by helping me unwrap. I remember her telling me to get a broom. I remember watching my cousins ripping the box of my SNES and fighting over how to set it up. These animals were fighting, pulling each other's hair, biting one another. I was that skinny, quiet, nerdy kid with glasses, so I just kept my distance. My mom shows her face and shouts why the presents have been opened before the other quests have arrived, especially my youngest uncle, who was bringing a camcorder. My aunt told my mom I just went crazy with excitement and ripped everything. Also that I hit one of her kids, and he was wailing in the corner. Obviously, my mom knows how I behave, but my entitled aunt is a master manipulator and told my mom I go crazy and show off in front of my cousins. I tried to tell my mom the truth, but she cut in with, "Let's call your dad about your lying." Even at that age, I knew my dad would believe her. So I was put on timeout by my mom because my aunt suggested it. I sat in the corner silently crying whilst watching my cousins fight over my presents. I remember my aunt telling my dad what a rude host I was, how I was hitting my cousins and not listening. To my horror, my dad tells me to face the wall and that he didn't raise me like that. Uncle Kev turns up about 20 minutes later and goes ballistic as to why I'm on timeout on my own birthday. I loved my youngest uncle. There's a reason why he's my favorite. He was cool. He was about 20. He had tattoos. He gave no damns, and best of all, even my aunt knew not to cross him. I remember Kev handing out backhands to my spoilt cousins to get them to stop fighting and shut up. I remember his hug and him sitting down and playing Mario with me. Best 10 minutes of my birthday. That 10 minutes made up for the rest of that crappy day. Uncle Kev had to leave soon and things went bad again. I had the control pad ripped from my hands not long after, so I pretty much just sat and watched. The adults were in the other room most of the day, and my aunt would come to watch us like a hawk every now and then. Obviously, she would always ask me to do something like, "Go get cousin 2 a drink," or "Cousin 3 can't find your bike, go get it out for him." Also stuff like, "What moisturizer does your mom use? What does she put in her hair? How much was that dress?" etc. This bit may not have happened on this day, but my aunt would always ask me questions about my mom's products and other similar stuff that I had no idea about or understood. About an hour later, she announced it was time to leave. I see my 12-year-old cousin packing away the game's console and holding it like it was his. I heard him ask him mom if he can take it. I tried to take it from him, but I had no chance. I told my aunt he's taking my game. She tells me that my dear cousin is only borrowing it, and that I was such a bad host, and how her children got slapped because of my lies. I ran and told my mom, then I ran to the front door to stop anyone from leaving till I got my game back. My mom came to the rescue this time. She just calmly took the SNES from my aunt, who had it tucked under her arm by this point. I should add that my cousins break things almost instantly. They had already broken their Sega. My aunt was saying how I said my cousins could borrow it, how she didn't see me play the damn thing, and obviously I didn't like it. That Uncle Kev got it for all of his nephews to share. Blah blah blah. I saw my dad coming, and I just grabbed the box from my mom, ran to my room and hid it. I can't remember the rest of the day. I remember my dad later telling me off for getting my cousins into trouble and how rude I was to my aunt. That's one of my earliest memories of my aunt's antics. Should add that this event won't even make it into her top 30 worst antics. Fast forwards 30 years, and everyone's kind of sick of her antics, including my dad. Everyone except her kids. We are all civil, but we keep our distance. I'll be sure to write more about Crazy Ruth. My blood boils just thinking about the things she's said and done over the years. Quick little story. After Uncle Kev turned up and gained control, he did indeed pull out his camcorder. The footage starts with me playing Mario for the first time, and then it pans around to show my cousins all sitting down with tears in their eyes, and Kev narrating, "These are the worst kids he's ever witnessed." Then shows my aunt's thunder face. I last saw this clip around 2002 in Uncle Kev's house. He made it into DVD with other funny family clips. Our entire extended family would laugh at that clip. That DVD mysteriously disappeared after my aunt's family visited one Christmas. Story 6. Hello all you wonderful Redditors. I've posted here before about a story that happened at my workplace last year and had a brand new story to share. For the record, this wasn't my compliance, but I was the sidekick in this tale. I work at a resort restaurant that's located in the main hotel building on the property. Due to particular things this year I can't say the name of, our resort and restaurant as a whole have had to go through a lot of changes and needed to adapt to a lot of new and different things. We've also been losing a lot of employees, and it's been affecting our performance and overall motivation. As a result, the resort hired a new head manager for the restaurant, Samuel, to manage the chaos. Samuel got to work almost immediately, resolving any issues he found or was told about by one of the employees and made changes accordingly. One of the things he decided to do was put a lock on what we in our restaurant all lovingly refer to as the cage. The cage is basically a couple tall shelves surrounded by an iron bar fence and gate that housed all our paper supplies like to-go boxes, cups, and bags along with a few miscellaneous things like crayons and such. Samuel worried that leaving it unlocked the whole time looked unprofessional and people could easily steal some of our supplies whenever they wanted. He told us during a meeting that he'd give keys to each of the managers so any of them could unlock the cage if we needed to get in. I was really skeptical of this idea and worried that it could lead to issues. For one, the managers at my workplace tend to have the ability to teleport, meaning they vanish 99% of the time you need them, and you don't know where they are. Sometimes, they'd all be unavailable because of a meeting or something, and you'd have to wait or find an alternative answer if one existed. Samuel assured me that I wouldn't need to worry because he'd have a key everywhere in that case. Well, he is the boss, so. About a week or so later, I was working the night shift on a Wednesday and was anxiously counting down the minutes till closing. It had been an incredibly slow day, so we didn't have much staff on duty, and we only had one manager on duty, Jerry. Jerry is not one of our main managers, but manages a neighboring department and has helped us a lot when we're short-staffed or if a manager isn't available. He's a lot like our former boss, kind, patient, organized, and a bit goofy, so we all get along with him. Jerry had also been absent from work for the past couple months, which he revealed he had spent on medical leave. He had been in a bad accident and broke 3 ribs, but despite being well enough to work, there was still a little pain, or so I remember. An hour before we were scheduled to close, Jerry asked me to start restocking our expo station's paper goods so we wouldn't have to worry about it later on. I nodded and headed towards the cage to collect the supplies. Well, what do you know? The cage is locked. Guess I'll have to ask the manager like Samuel said I'd need to. I told Jerry about the lock and said I needed the key to get in. He was silent for a moment before he turned to look at me with a face that I can only describe as a mix between irritation and disappointment. I don't have one, he said in a sigh. Samuel said he was going to give me one, but he never did and I completely forgot until now. He rubbed his head and we both walked to the cage. As he stared at the heavy-duty lock and chains, he told me to go to loss prevention, our security department, and ask them for the spare key they should have. I did as I was told and left him scratching his head while studying the gate intensely. Unfortunately for us, no one was home. The door was locked up tight and you couldn't see any lights on through the windows aside from the TV monitors that played camera footage. It was likely that all the loss prevention officers were busy doing tasks around the resort property. There was no way of knowing where they were or how long they'd be gone for. I've seen times when they'd be gone for hours, and tonight, we only had less than one before we really needed to close up everything. Again, it was a slow day, and we all wanted to go home as soon as possible. I relayed the news to Jerry, and he just sighed again, looking up and down at the cage with a forlorn look. At this point, I think any normal person would just say, "Heck with it," and walk away. It wasn't like we needed to restock that night and could in the morning when Samuel would be there. If we just explained the situation to Samuel, he may have been understanding about it. Not Jerry, though. Jerry was determined. No luck in the world was going to keep this man from his destiny of obtaining the priceless paper and/or plastic goods beyond that metal prison. Not even his recovering ribs would stop him. At that moment, Jerry made the executive decision that if we couldn't go through the gate, he was going to go over it instead. The thing about the cage is that the fence is basically just iron bars running horizontally and vertically about 2 inches apart. So basically, there's enough room for a foot to fit in. The fence was also about 6 feet tall, and there wasn't a roof covering it. Needless to say, it was possible to jump the cage's fence, but it would be difficult and dangerous. I tried to stop him, offered to do it in his place. I'm 5'23", and probably wouldn't have an issue, but eventually caved in and helped where I could. With a few makeshift platforms, collaboration, and a conveniently placed stepladder, Jerry had managed to get in and out of the cage, and we had obtained our paper goods. I convinced Jerry to leave the stepladder inside as I was feeling petty and thought it'd be funny for someone to ask why it was stuck in there. Jerry told Samuel everything the next morning as they shared the same shift. Jerry said Samuel wasn't mad, just a bit surprised and a little apologetic. I wasn't there to see it, but I think Samuel got the message, and since then, we haven't had issues with the keys. Never underestimate the power and determination of a restaurant manager and his petty sidekick.